Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Primo NUTMEG. On this week's show, the Robbo and I travel to Washington, D.C. to cover the protests of Donald Trump's inauguration. If you enjoy this show, please do subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And please do check out our YouTube page as we have lots of video of the protests as well. Hope you enjoy the show. All right, so it's January 19th, about 6 p.m. Rob and I are walking towards the Potomac, and there's lots of fireworks going on.
Battle has begun.
Lots of fireworks going on near the Lincoln Memorial, where Trump is having a
rager.
Yeah, he's having a concert. I think we go this way. We're trying to walk down there now, but there's a lot of fucking fireworks going on. So we're at a giant protest here outside the National Press building.
Yeah.
And there's...
We found it. We found the heat.
Seems like quite a commotion going on up here. A lot of people moving around.
Yeah, it's definitely an anarchist protest. There are Antifa flags and lots of black clothing.
American, I am ready to deliver on my promises of blind travel research, zombie preparedness, mandatory toothbrush laws, and yes, free bonus for every last damn American. It's gonna happen, people. It's gonna happen. One more thing.
Vermin Supreme just stopped a guy from getting beaten up.
Yeah.
What was he doing, Rob?
Oh, they're burning some shit over there too. Got some stuff on fire. Well, basically, we've been standing here on the street, and a guy came through. Well put together, blazer, dress shirt, jeans. Seems to be the uniform for the Trump supporter tonight. And he had come by about 10 minutes earlier screaming "Heil Trump" and throwing a semi-fascist salute and agitating these people here. And I can't say that I didn't see it coming, because he walked right into a group of pretty hardcore folks. So I noticed a dust up kind of happening up the road. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but we were watching this balloon get inflated and the projector going up. Decided to go down the street and immediately just got caught in the crush of this guy getting pummeled. He appeared to have like a laceration or something on his face, so I think he already got some business from somebody. And I got caught right up in the middle of it. And just so happens our buddy Vermin Supreme swooped in. He pushed right by me. Said, "Excuse me, I gotta get to this guy."
Yeah, he went and rescued him.
And he interceded for this guy. And I gotta say, wouldn't expect anything less from Vermin Supreme.
He's a real life superhero.
He's a fucking amazing American.
So what's happening is we're outside of the Deplorable, which is being held at the National Press building. That's why there's this protest. And anybody... Jesus. Sorry, cops are chasing people now. Everybody's running. Alright, so... Jesus. Cops are chasing people. They have the mace guns out. So Rob, when we first got here, it seemed like there was a lot of Trump people, like intermixed.
Yeah.
That's kind of gone away now.
No, I think they've all migrated to the far outside. I mean, I definitely still see a lot of them around, but they're being set upon by these protesters.
Yeah, the street itself is it's their streets.
It's become a carnival.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm over here looking at this child fake punching a guy in the face. This 11-year-old kid or something. Mock punching appears to be a Trump supporter. Yep. But I mean, every time one of these groups of attendees from the Deplorable Ball leaves the press club, they're being, pretty aggressively chased and heckled, and one kid that was next to me threw a full can of spray paint at one of them, so I made some distance from him before he got, beat the fuck up. I don't know. It's interesting.
That it is. Well, I just got maced in the eye. I wasn't doing anything, obviously. I just was filming these fucking cops freaking out. They actually ended up macing themselves in the face, but I also got a little bit of it. It fucking burns. Not pleasant. Alright, so it is now 6:45 a.m. on Inauguration Day. Rob and I just got up. Rob, how you feeling after last night?
Well, we survived. Last night was some of the most real street action I've ever seen. Not been a part of, but definitely witnessing it from the outside was pretty real. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling ready to meet the madness today. Need about 3 cups of coffee and a good free bagel from the lobby. I'm ready to go.
So we're going to head over to, I don't know what they're calling it. It's like a 420 thing. The idea is at DuPont Circle, they're handing out all this marijuana, and then people are going to light up at 4 minutes and 20 seconds into Donald Trump's speech later on. And then after we're going by there to get to Malcolm X Square for Occupy the Inauguration, where Jill Stein and a bunch of other activists are going to be.
To relax and enjoy this new reality that we have here in our country. So some people aren't happy with it, and maybe they just need to smoke a little joint to take the edge off.
How do you think about Trump administration?
I'm interested to see what's going to happen, for good or ill. I think Trump has become a real catalyst for change in the country, whether from the left or from the right. I see that he's definitely antagonized a lot of people on the left, and maybe that's going to convince them that they really need to focus and make really hard changes. Something more than just agitating in the street and destroying private property. I think people need to. This may really force that next step in our evolution as a country. You're welcome. You're welcome.
So what you just heard was Robbo getting interviewed by a Japanese television news crew. How was that, Rob? Were you expecting that to happen?
No, but that's usually when you're given a great gift like that, is when you're not expecting it. So I had a really great time. It was cool. I got to give my message, give the Robbo message, and the guy was very short, but it was fun.
So what'd you think about that gathering, the giving away free marijuana, and that giant line that was there?
Yeah, I can't say I wasn't surprised at the turnout. It was quite impressive. The lines went at least 2 blocks, which was pretty cool. And as I said to the crew, it's just as it's safer than drinking beers and getting in car accidents or something. It's certainly safer than any other Schedule I drugs or but the harder stuff, really. A lot of people are turning to opiates and prescriptions when marijuana can take care of most of those problems in some way, shape, or form. It's quite multi-purpose.
So now we are in Malcolm X Park, and we are at Occupy the Inauguration. We're waiting for Jill Stein and a number of other speakers to show up.
We do not consent, not by precedent. We do not consent to a future of war, endless war and austerity, of Wall Street fraud, of endless student debt, of mass incarceration, of the security state and surveillance. We do not consent to an environment and a climate in meltdown that is unraveling before our eyes. We do not consent to the oppression of women and the LGBTQ community. We do not consent to the deportation of immigrants who in large measure are refugees from the very policies of the United States that has driven them here to start with. between NAFTA, between our war on drugs, between the overturning of democracies, the support for the coup in Honduras. This is what has driven so many millions of refugees to this country, only to be criminalized, to be detained, to be night raided. We are standing up to say no to all of that. We are standing up to say yes to an America and a world that works for all of us.
Hell yes!
It's important not to let them make us take our eyes off the prize. They are trying to put us purely into defensive mode. We need to be in offensive mode. We are standing up and fighting. We will not go away, but we're not just fighting back, we are fighting forward for the future that we deserve. Because what produced Donald Trump to start with? It's important to remember, Donald Trump did not come out of nowhere. In fact, polls showed over and over that the majority of Donald Trump's voters were not voting for him, they were actually voting against Hillary Clinton and the track record of the Democrats. So it is very much a bipartisan problem. And you will notice there is a massive effort going on, sort of a public relations campaign to hijack the opposition to Donald Trump and label it Democratic. If we do that, we are just going to keep driving the economic austerity and despair that is producing right-wing extremism all over the world, which is a response to globalization, to the offshoring of jobs, to the likes of the global trade agreements like NAFTA, like the WTO, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade Agreement. This is what we need to stand up against, and against both political parties that are being funded by the predatory banks, by the fossil fuel giants, by the war profiteers and the insurance companies and the usual suspects. It's really important for us to remember where the power comes from. The power comes from us. That power is right here today, and it is growing stronger. As horrible as the outcome of this election is, it was really not a surprise in some ways. This was an incredibly toxic election, an election more dominated by big money and big corporate media, and indeed the backroom strategy of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, whose plan was to lift up these extremist, lunatic, right-wing fringe Republicans in order to make it easier for Hillary Clinton to get elected. Well, that kind of backfired, didn't it? The same DNC that sabotaged Bernie Sanders, who would have won hands down in this election. We have no one to thank but the Democratic Party for the outcome of this election, even though they are working overtime right now to try to blame this on the Russians. But as hard as I and others look for the actual evidence, that evidence is no more than that we, the security agencies, agree that the Russians did it. Well, would you please show us some evidence? Yes, the Russians are capable of doing it. We do it all the time. This is how the world works. And remember, these leaks or hacks, whatever they were, would not have been a problem at all had there not been this incredible backstabbing and sabotage going on behind closed doors on the part of the Democratic Party to start with. This is very much a crisis they brought on themselves. And for those who think that we're just going to convince the DNC, the Democratic Party, to just get on the right side here, all we have to do is work a little harder. Who worked their tail off in this campaign for Bernie Sanders? Would you say you went to the mat? You went all out. There was nothing you didn't do, and you did everything right. And had the elections not been, shall we say, a little bit irregular, we would have had a very different outcome. So don't fool yourself for a minute that the DNC is going to get talked into turning to the right side of history. Because Bernie is not the first person to have been shafted by the Democratic Party. You can look at what happened to Dennis Kucinich, or what happened to Jesse Jackson, or you can go back further to the realignment movement of the 1960s and 70s. I don't know if there's anybody out there old enough to remember, but that's when the Democratic Party was going to be made into this progressive movement. But it failed, and do you know why that failed? Big money, and especially the war in Vietnam. Because if you were a critic of the war in Vietnam, you did not have the credibility to then criticize the Democratic Party. So the reform effort floundered on the war, in turn powered by the money.
Jill, strategically,
Yes.
how are you going to keep the Democratic Party from taking over this movement like they did the anti-war movement?
Well, this is really the $24,000 question. They are out there, with resources and with the media and working overtime to do it. But I think what is different is that there is a wake-up going on that they cannot stop. And, that's why they had to suppress, alternative voices in the movement so intensely during this election, because most people now are clamoring for a new independent political force. People were screaming for open debates. People were demanding ranked choice voting so that we can vote without fear, which is another way that they constrain us. I really urge people to fight on the issues, but we got to fight together. It's going to take a concerted strategy and concerted action for us to push back against the co-optation by the forces of corporate America as represented by the Democratic Party.
Would you work with the Libertarian Party to build a true grassroots movement?
Yes, absolutely. And as you know, there are different kinds of libertarians. There are the corporate libertarians, and there are the grassroots libertarians. And we have a lot of connections and common vision with the grassroots libertarians, and we have talked about working with them on many of these issues, especially on opening up the debates, creating a People's Debate Commission, which would be absolutely transformative, and potentially on ranked choice voting, which would get rid of this politics of fear. It's not exactly working out for us to, vote based on who do you hate the most. Democracy needs an affirmative vision, so we need to liberate our voting system.
Awesome. Thank you,
Great.
Jill.
Thanks
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Trump and his supporters and us today, they want to build this corrupt system up. And the people right here, we want to tear this system down, this corrupt system down, brick by hypocritical brick. I'm going to close with this. This is a time to put aside our differences. We got white, black, Asian, Latino, gay, straight, Christian, Muslim, atheist. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. And this is the message that we must send today. That we are going to refuse and we are going to resist. But we're going to do it together under the umbrella of no justice, no peace. Under the umbrella of the people united will never be defeated. This is the face the media don't want to show you on the 10 o'clock news, the 11 o'clock news. But we must force them to see us. We must stay to the streets. We must shut it the fuck down every time. This is not a time to be weak. This is not a time to be depressed. We always had the power. And we're going to show these racist motherfuckers just what time it is. Black Lives Matter, stand with you. Stand with us. And together we can shut this corrupt system down. The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. The people to the people. Black Lives Matter.
Slave or what? I was wondering. I don't see them braving up.
I'm recording, by the way, so you know.
Cool, it don't matter.
Can I ask you, how do you feel about Trump being the new president?
I mean, we're just going from one dictator to the next. I mean, you know, that's what they're begging for right now, a dictator.
So Rob and I are in the middle of a police standoff. They were lighting off flash grenades a long time ago, but it's just been kind of milling around for a while. There's a limousine that's kind of smashed up.
I think right now this is only going to go on for so long before the police are going to clear the street.
Yeah.
So, you know, despite the fact that most of these people are, you know, just kind of milling around, blocking traffic and the like, eventually they're going to be cleared out, whether by command or force. So.
Did you see anybody get hurt by those flash grenades? They did like a dozen of them.
I saw a couple go off like right next to people who were standing in the middle of the street, you know, kind of by themselves too. So I got to imagine it must have been, you know, pretty loud for them. Whether or not they caught any bits and pieces from it, because there was like pieces of the grenades like flying through the air and shit. So yeah, it looked painful. I know I saw some people get shot with rubber bullets. So.
It's 6:30 p.m. Donald Trump has been president for about 6.5 hours. Unfortunately for the podcast, I didn't get too much of essentially the riot, or I don't know what you'd call that. Pretty extreme demonstrations that Rob and I saw. So you can check that out on our YouTube page. But yeah, Rob, that was pretty intense, don't you think?
Yeah, it was definitely a really wild afternoon. You know, the day started with a lot of anticipation. It started on a really positive note with the cannabis gathering at DuPont Circle. That was a pretty mellow time. We made our way over to, was it McPherson Park?
No, it was Malcolm X Park.
Malcolm X Park to see the Occupy Inauguration Green Party gathering. Saw Jill Stein there. You know, you could get the sense that there was, you know, a lot of youthful agitation that was building. You could definitely see the split between some of the old guard and the new guard as far as the attitude of the day. But, you know, they were committed to being peaceful, and people had that option to demonstrate in any way they wanted to. And that's what we ended up running into later with the anarchists, you know, actively fighting the cops, ripping up pavers from the streets, burning trash cans. We saw limousines and SUVs, windows smashed. The police were being very liberal with the flashbang grenades.
Yeah. How many do you think there were? There must have been like 10 to 20, right?
Yeah. I mean, from the one segment alone where we were pushed down the block, I mean, they threw at least eight bombs at us, and I mean, we were pretty close. We were on the sidewalk, of course. You know, it was. I have to say, they did keep the bombs in the street. Anybody who was in the street, though, they were pretty much fair game. It was such a shock, you know, from what we saw inside the security zone around the parade route, which was very calm. There were people that did have signs that were there to demonstrate, but I think the overwhelming presence of the security was enough to cow, I think, anyone who had really violent aspirations.
I think probably the weirdest instance of that was when the cops chased us back with the flashbangs, and and there was a ton of them, and we kind of retreated to where the National Guard was, and like we were in with the soldiers for a while, like while the flashbangs were going on around us.
Right.
That was kind of odd, and then they had to get the soldiers out of there.
Yeah, you noticed the soldiers moved off first,
Yep.
And that was probably a pretty good indication you might not want to stand there anymore. I guess they were redeployed around to the other side of the park that we saw later. But yeah, it looked like it could have gotten worse. But
Yep.
I think that a lot of those kids with the black masks, black bloc, I suppose that's who they were. I think they got scared because the cops weren't playing around. They weren't messing around. They were well prepared, and they were moving in force today.
And I think that, I don't know, it was weird. Once we got pushed back to McPherson, it seemed like there was a pretty good mix of people, because after a short while, the Trumpers started showing up in there too.
Yeah, I think, well, what we ended up hearing later at the Libertarian headquarters from those kids who were on the mall is that once the riots, or they're not riots, but the protesters descended upon the checkpoints themselves, when they had moved from their gathering grounds in the parks outside of the parade group and actually tried to block the entrances to the parade grounds. I think that's what drew a lot of security attention to the mall, and basically he had said that they were locked inside the mall for a time, I think, until they could contain the crowds in the streets outside of the parade grounds. But once that cordon was relaxed, you definitely saw a lot of Trump guys mingling in amongst the crowds. I overheard one guy pretty close to me, just wait, I can't wait till one of them burns the flag. I'm going to beat the shit out of that motherfucker. Like, there were some very angry Trump guys that were, and they weren't in large groups. They were certainly outnumbered.
Yeah.
But, there were groups of 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't really see more than maybe 5 guys at once. But they were definitely there, and I think they were looking for something. I think they were looking for what they really had missed it already. As soon as the police started throwing the bombs and were surrounding sort of these park areas, those guys just disappeared. I think they gave it up.
They did cause a lot of damage, though. They smashed a lot of glass, tore up a limousine, all that shit.
Spray painted buildings, smashed up bus stops. They ripped the paper boxes off the streets, threw them into the road. They were...
that was an interesting part, too. That's actually the only time that the National Guard was really kind of interacting with the protesters.
Yeah.
When the black bloc or whatever, the guys wearing the black clothing and masks, they were taking those newspaper boxes, the metal containers, and they were moving them out into the road to block the police cars.
Yeah.
And then, like, the National Guard was going right after them and taking them back and putting them back.
And I also noticed the soldiers, even when they were doing that, they didn't try to. They made no physical contact with those guys at all. It was actually kind of funny because the black bloc guys moved the barricade out into the street, and the National Guard guys walked up and moved it away, and then they would move a paper box up, and they'd come jogging up. The guard come jogging up and just drag it away, and. There was no arguing, no insults, no pepper spray, no batons. They were merely just counteracting whatever the anarchists were doing. It was just kind of funny to see him running back and forth.
I think there's something to be said for, if you really think that these institutions are corrupt and they need to be abolished or whatever, then why not just create other institutions? Like, how many of those people are growing their own food or using Bitcoin?
And that's another part of it. You're right. They need to liberate themselves from the power structure in every aspect of their lives. They need to start educating themselves about growing their own food, creating cooperative gardens. They need to know about alternative currency and such as Bitcoin. It's all important. It's all a way of emancipating yourself from the grid.
Well, everyone, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Primo Nutmeg. Thank you for listening. If you did enjoy the show, please do subscribe on iTunes and SoundCloud. And also check out our YouTube page and subscribe there, as we have lots of exciting video of these protests also. Hope you enjoyed the show, and until next time.